The Chicago Bears drafting Michigan tight end Colston Loveland garnered some mixed reactions from the fan base. But you should really be excited about this dynamic play-making tight end who's a great fit for Ben Johnson's offense.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. Terms and conditions apply. On the show today, I really want to get to know Michigan tight end Colston Loveland and break down this pick in every way that we can. We'll go through a scouting report on his strengths and weaknesses and how that fits into this Chicago Bears offense. And then we'll look at a bigger picture at the selection at 10 in the draft. Some Bears fans would have preferred Tyler Warren or some sort of offensive or defensive lineman there, but we'll kind of take a look at what the draft board was when Chicago was on the clock and how Loveland is right there in that conversation as best player available. And we'll wrap up by looking at some best players still available entering day 2 that the Bears could target with their 2 second-round picks. But Loveland was always loosely in this conversation around the Bears pick as a tight end option. And if you've been an everyday listener of the Locked On Bears podcast, you've heard us multiple times talk about Tyler Warren as as maybe not the quite perfect fit for Ben Johnson, but that Colston Loveland might be more of that tight end that he would prefer. We talked about it on yesterday's podcast as the pre-draft rumors were swirling and how there was surprisingly not much conversation at all about Colston Loveland and how he could be in that pick. And then a couple weeks ago when we talked about Warren versus Loveland and the other tight end options, we talked about how Colston Loveland's skill set aligns more with what Ben Johnson has typically preferred with tight ends. So I didn't find myself all that shocked when that was the selection at 10, given how the draft board played out. We'll go through the draft board in a little bit here, but as far as Loveland's skill set goes and fitting into this Bears offense, Loveland is a fast, fluid, and explosive athlete at the tight end position. He didn't run the 40-yard dash or do any combine drills because he's still recovering from shoulder surgery, but he would have been off the charts in how well this player moves up and down the football field. He has the speed, the route running ability to separate in against man coverage. Not just a guy who's going to find a hole in his zone and sit there and wait for the quarterback to get in the ball, but he runs a lot of slant routes from a wide receiver position because he has that kind of skill set physically and as a route runner. But he's not a bad blocker either. I think that's been a controversial aspect of this in people's Colston Loveland evaluations, but this guy is physical and can block on the front side of running plays. Sure, he's not an elite blocker, but he's a very, very good blocker. And it's that combination of pass catching ability and blocking ability that makes him a better fit for Ben Johnson's offense than Tyler Warren. And I think is what sold them on making him the 10th overall pick. Now, on the negative side, I think Colston Loveland is a little bit lean and lacks some bulk and strength there, at least like core body mass. He's got strong hands as a blocker and as a receiver, but he's not, just in terms of trying to anchor and take on big NFL defensive linemen, maybe there will be a little bit of a challenge there. Although he's one of the younger players in the draft. He just turned 21 years old, or is about to just turn 21. So he's got room to still grow physically, at least in terms of adding weight to his frame. So I think he can bulk up a little bit and be that true inline tight end mold of receiver. I also think you look at Colston Loveland's tape, he can't always make the most difficult contested catches. If a guy's draped all over him, or if somebody hits him as the ball comes in, he can't always hold on to the really tough catches. He doesn't have a lot of drops on his his resume, on his tape. He's not someone who he drops the easy one, right? Where it's how did you not hold on to that pass? It's more like the tough catches, he can't make them, and he's not the vacuum cleaner that holds on to every single tough catch that ever comes his way. It's a nitpicking weakness, but sometimes you want a tight end to be able to fight through that contact a little bit more and make the difficult catch. That wasn't always a perfect strong suit of his at Michigan. And I think the biggest concern about Colston Loveland, for me, is the injury situation. Like, for Bears fans were somewhere upset about taking a tight end that early and why Loveland over Warren. And like, I saw a lot of complaining and consternating about Colston Loveland for other reasons that didn't make a lot of sense to me or didn't have a lot of merit to me. But the shoulder injury is like the one area where I'm with you 100%. If your big concern is you drafted an injured player, a player who is still recovering from shoulder surgery and isn't going to be ready to go the moment he steps into the field, like, he's probably not going to do rookie minicamp. The Bears say he's on track for training camp, but we have some Chicago PTSD with drafting players that are injured at the draft and trying to be confident that everything is going to be fine and they're going to recover and be exactly the player you thought they would be coming out of college. And we've certainly seen that not be the case. I think most recently, just last year, Karan Amagaji, when the Bears drafted him, we found out after the draft he's dealing with an injury, wouldn't be ready for rookie minicamp and OTAs, but they told us Karan Amagaji should be good to go for training camp. That was what they said after the draft. Exactly the same things they're saying now about Colston Loveland. But as it turned out, Karan Amagaji needed more time, wasn't ready for training camp, missed the entirety of the preseason, and then never really got a chance to ramp up and be ready for the regular season, right? Like, and then when he throws out there, he never had any preparation, didn't get really coached much, he looked terrible, and basically had to redshirt his whole rookie season because of that injury he had coming out of the draft. And then you can go back farther to like Kevin White, and I think about I don't know if Gabe Karimi or Chris Williams, the offensive tackles of yesteryear, I don't know if they were injured on draft day, but certainly injuries were concerns for those guys early on and often. And the Bears say the shoulder checks out and that he'll be good to go for training camp, and they're not worried about it, and it's not supposed to be something that's going to linger, that it's all cleaned up and it's good to go. It's just about recovery, and he'll be totally fine. And we're not doctors, and we don't have access to the medical records, so we kind of just have to take their word for it and give them the benefit of the doubt. But that's the one area where it's that's the risk for Colston Loveland. There were reports that other teams had dropped Loveland way down farther on their board because of their concerns over his medicals. Again, do we know how far or how true that was? We can only take what we can learn from the outside, but that's a real concern here that I'm going to be skeptical of until we see him playing on the field, we see him practicing at training camp, we see him healthy and sustaining, because he doesn't have an injury history per se. He wasn't missing a ton of time over the course of his college career. He just missed some games this past season. I think he had a concussion for one game the year before, but generally has been pretty durable. I just don't like taking a guy made injury recovery with a top 10 pick in the first round. That's the one area of Colston Loveland that I will meet anyone's concern and match you there 100%. But I think the scouting report, the skill set, the fit, the value as far as getting a good quality player with the 10th overall pick, I think it's all there with Colston Loveland. I understand the optics of, hey, wait, Tyler Warren was the number one tight end and you passed on him for the number two tight end. And the Bears certainly didn't see it that way. And I think when you take a bigger picture look at what the Bears' actual options were when they were on the clock at 10, I don't really think you could do any better than what they got in Colston Loveland. So we'll kind of put ourselves in Ryan Poles' shoes and look at what the different options might have been next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn Jobs. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. And that's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. Because when you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. I'm on LinkedIn. I bet you're on LinkedIn. And if you're not, a lot of your friends, family members, and coworkers are all a part of the LinkedIn community. And so it's a great way to find the best pool of candidates, even people who might not be looking for a job, but could be open to the right opportunity. It's why 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high quality hires. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. I think Colston Loveland is fully worth the 10th overall pick for the Chicago Bears, because I think Ryan Poles was in a tough spot. And I also think if Tyler Warren wasn't on the board, this pick would be more universally praised by Chicago Bears fans. I think it's the perception and allure of Tyler Warren that isn't necessarily accurate, but is nonetheless the perception that has, I thought, left a little bit of a sour taste for a lot of Bears fans, feeling like, well, did they get the best player they could at that spot? Because otherwise, I don't see other options that are like, wow, I can't believe the Bears took Colston Loveland instead of taking blank player. Right? There was no other big time prospect that you were hoping would fall to the Bears with the 9th overall pick, or excuse me, with the 10th overall pick, and allow you to get the player you wanted all along. Like, the players most of us wanted all along were all gone. Kind of as expected. We talked about this a lot in the pre-draft process, that Will Campbell wasn't going to make it to 10. Mason Graham wasn't going to make it to 10. Ashton Genty wasn't going to make it to 10. Armand Membu wasn't going to make it to 10. And then even Calvin Banks from Texas, who kind of seemed like the Bears' backup plan, doesn't even make it to 10. He goes number 9 to the New Orleans Saints. And so I think it's a combination of all of the fake rumors about the Bears trying to trade up for Ashton Genty, which were not true, and Ryan Poles basically confirmed as much in his post-first round press conference. Because it came out, to be clear, Jay Glazer from Fox Sports reported that the Jaguars trading Tua with the Browns was a deal that had been in place for like at least a week now. It had been in place for a while. They worked this out ahead of the draft. They just need to make sure that Cam Ward went number 1, and then the Jaguars would trade up to 2 for Travis Hunter. So like that deal was already in place. So then when the fake Twitter insiders came out and said the Bears are making offers to the Jaguars to move up for 5 for Genty, it's just not true, because the Jaguars already had a deal in place to go to 2. Like that, those things weren't happening. And then Ryan Poles says after the draft, we made a couple of calls about moving up, but it was just going to cost too much. We didn't want to give up multiple picks in day 2 of the draft to move up, because we want to be able to take players there. Like, the Bears were not very seriously looking at moving up in this draft. It wasn't something it was something they considered, but never really went hard after. But the problem is, as Bears fans on social media, right, you're hearing about, oh, they could trade up for Abdul Carter. They could trade up for Mason Graham. They could trade up for Ashton Genty. Oh no, they stayed at 10, but at least could they get Tyler Warren? And then, oh no, they take Colston Loveland. Like, I think that's what ended up shaping some of the negative reaction that came immediately after the pick. But when you isolate some of this stuff and say, okay, the Bears were never trading up for any of those guys, and Genty was never going to make it down to 10. And none of these guys, I mean, maybe Calvin Banks, but none of the other guys were going to make it down to 10. So the only real decision that I'm going to allow you to nitpick for, that you're justified nitpicking, is if you like Tyler Warren more than Colston Loveland, you're perfectly justified in thinking that way. I don't think it's like clear and obvious that Loveland is just this way better player and no one should have thought Warren was better. Like, those two guys can be neck and neck and can both be really good players. And the Bears said, we just think Loveland's a better fit with what we have, with our players, with our scheme, with our coaches. They liked what Loveland could offer versus what Warren could offer. That's the one pick that I'll grant you. If you feel like the Bears got the wrong tight end, that's fine. But I've seen people say, well, the tight end's not good value there. It's a non-premium position. And I agree. Generally, I don't want to take a tight end in the first round. But the question is then who are you taking instead? Because when you look at what players were, like, if you think about best players available with the 10th overall pick, it's Loveland, it's Warren. Michael Williams from Georgia goes number 11 right after that. So he's there. You got like Jalen Walker, the Georgia linebacker / edge rusher. Kenneth Grant, the Michigan nose tackle, goes a few picks later. Shamar Stewart, the Texas A&M defensive end. Walter Nolan, the defensive tackle from Ole Miss. Or like the next running back, Omarion Hampton from North Carolina. Like, I'm just not seeing a name on that list that's like, oh man, that's the guy. We really should. I'm mad they took Colston Loveland because I really wanted Michael Williams from Georgia or Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M. Like, we all talked in this pre-draft process about how the edge rushers after Abdul Carter all kind of have flaws. None of them really emerge as like this clear-cut 10-sack guy that you think is a perfect scheme fit that's going to be this great dynamic edge rusher in the NFL. And Michael Williams was obviously the first one of those guys to go right after the Bears picked, and he would have been right there in that conversation for me. But I don't sit here and go, wow, like, what if Loveland is such a bad pick because they could have had Michael Williams? I mean, I would have preferred to have a defensive lineman there or an offensive lineman there. Like, that's what feels like the best value. But if I'm trying to say best player available, Colston Loveland to me is the only player that was available here, maybe besides Tyler Warren, that you can really see that truly, truly special, like all-pro, game-changing player upside there. Not that he's guaranteed to be that, but you can see a path where Colston Loveland is a 1,000-yard receiver as a tight end. I mean, that's on the high end of the spectrum, right? But he can be up in that George Kittle, Rob Gronkowski caliber of player at his very best outcome. And maybe, again, you could debate Tyler Warren in there as well, but none of the other options there. You know, the defensive lineman, none of those guys look to me like with that upside to be that all-pro 10, 15 sack year guy. Maybe they could get there, but they got a lot of steps. They need a lot of work to get there. Whereas like Loveland, it has some proven production here. Like, you know what you're getting. You're not drafting him to develop him into something that he hasn't already shown in college. You just take that and maximize it, give him a real quarterback, unlike what Michigan had this past season when they were rotating guys, and a real smart offensive coordinator like Ben Johnson that can utilize a tight end weapon like this. It just seems like it's a really nice, clean fit all around, and there's not just some better golden alternative that you can really be mad about the Bears not taking instead, except for Tyler Warren. And the Bears are telling you, no, we like Loveland better. He's a better fit for us and for this offense. And at some point, you got to defer to Ben Johnson on that one, right? Ben Johnson knows what is the best fit for him and not the best fit for him. And this is two tight ends side by side. It's one thing if you're trying to debate, okay, is it a tight end versus a running back or a tight end versus a wide receiver, and which one's going to be a better fit for your offense? But when you're just looking at two tight ends side by side, it's pretty easy to just say, yeah, I like this one better than that one, because Ben Johnson wants at the tight end who can be more effective as a blocker. Tyler Warren is definitely worse in that department. I think Colston Loveland is more of a well-rounded tight end prospect, whereas Tyler Warren is a little bit more of an oversized receiver, which is great, and he should have a very successful career. And I think the Colts are going to be able to get a lot out of him in that offense. Like, it's not anti-Tyler Warren to say Colston Loveland might be a better fit with what the Bears want, and it's certainly not a hot take that the Bears have Colston Loveland ranked ahead of Tyler Warren, because we heard it through the pre-draft process. Other teams did too. It was not a consensus on Warren being the number one tight end in this draft class. Now, certainly, taking Loveland with the 10th pick, he has to be great, right? In order to justify that pick, he has to be a 6, 7, 800-yard-a-year receiver at a minimum. Maybe not right away as a rookie, but he has to develop into that caliber of player. A top 10 pick at tight end needs to be special. The bar has to be very, very high there. And so it's a lot of pressure and a lot of expectations, but you have to trust Ben Johnson. That's why you hired him as your head coach, to run the offense, to build an offense, to support Caleb Williams. And after all the Bears did in the free agent period to invest in the trenches, they didn't really do much at the skill positions. They didn't add much at tight end behind Cole Kmet. They didn't add much at wide receiver behind DJ Moore and Rome Odunze. Didn't add anything at running back. And so I can see where they want to come back around and put a big investment in the skill position here. Makes a lot of sense to me, especially because they can go into the second round of the draft and still be able to address the trenches. There's a couple of good offensive line prospects. There are a lot more defensive line prospects there, and we'll go through what the best players available are entering day 2 of the draft and who could be some of the Chicago Bears' top targets with the 39th and 41st picks next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. The NBA playoff action is heating up, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on all of the fun. Because right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if that first bet wins. And they've got all your sports, not just NBA playoffs. You can bet on the second round of the NFL draft. You can bet on baseball, hockey, soccer, tennis, boxing, you name it. They got it all in the FanDuel app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So as we enter day 2 of the draft, the Bears pick twice in the first what is that, 10 picks of the draft, 33, yeah, to get to 39 and 41. And then they pick again at 72. Ryan Poles has been emphasizing how much they're valuing the picks in these rounds. And so I would expect them to, they certainly could move a little bit up or down, but this is a spot where I think they see as a sweet spot to add some premium players for this team. And when you go tight end in round 1, to me, that puts a little bit more of an emphasis on the trenches for round 2. Ryan Poles always insists, hey, we're going to stick to our draft board. We're not just going to reach for an offensive lineman because we really want an offensive lineman. We're not just going to reach for this because we really want that. They're going to let it play out and kind of see who the best players available are on their draft board. As I look at it today, ahead of the day 2 of the draft starting, I see Mike Green, the defensive end from Marshall, as kind of being my top choice as the best pass rusher, edge rusher still available. He has very real reports of sexual assault allegations against him. Like, those reports were filed. It's real that those reports were filed. What happened in those incidences, we don't know. But so there's real red flags around Mike Green that have contributed to him falling down to this area. But also along the defensive line, excuse me, you've got the likes of, good Lord. Let me take a hard reset here. Also along the defensive line, you've got the likes of Donovan Ezereku from Boston College, whose name I will not be able to correctly pronounce at any point in this draft process. You've got edge rusher like Landon Jackson from Arkansas, or the 2 Ohio State edge rushers, Sawyer and Tui Mulawau, and another name I can't pronounce, or on the interior, guys like Darius Alexander from Toledo. I was disappointed to see somebody like Tyleek Jackson from Ohio State end up sneaking in there in the first round. I thought, man, he would be a guy that would have been ideal for the Bears at this stage of the draft. But nonetheless, there's still TJ Sanders from South Carolina, Alfred Collins from Texas, Shamar Turner from Texas A&M. A lot of good defensive line options so far. Nick Scarton from Texas A&M as well. That, between 33 and 39, some of those guys might come off the board, but you feel like a couple of those should be options available there for the Bears. O-line is a little bit thinner, I think, because so many of them went in the first round. But I think, Ariante Ursary from Minnesota is one of the better players available here. I don't think he's a great scheme fit, but he's going to be high on other teams' draft boards. Or Jonah Sava'alania from Arizona, the Samoan offensive lineman, or Tate Ratledge from Georgia, Marcus Mbao from Purdue. Like, there's a few options here, but I don't necessarily see 39 and 41 right now being a sweet spot for offensive line. There might be a guy there, but there's not as many options as there are on the defensive line, or like at running back. Somebody like Quinshad Judkins from Ohio State, or Caleb Johnson from Iowa, Cam Scatabo from Arizona State, maybe even Dylan Sampson from Tennessee. There could be a few different running back options there. And then there's a lot of defensive backs. If the Bears want to get a Tyreek Stevenson replacement or a long-term safety of the future, Will Johnson from Michigan is a guy who's in free fall because of his medicals. Nick Emanawari from South Carolina is a super athletic strong safety who could be in this conversation. Siobhan Revel from East Carolina is a corner who I think would be a good scheme fit, good man-to-man kind of guy that Dennis Allen could really enjoy, or Trey Amos from Ole Miss. And those guys were all talked about as first-round talents in this draft. You can find good cornerbacks and other safeties too. I'll throw in Xavier Watts from Notre Dame, or even Kevin Winston Jr. from Penn State. Like, there's defensive backs, there's defensive linemen, a little bit less on the O-line, but a little bit more at running back. And I think those are kind of the sweet spots for the Bears here. I guess you couldn't rule out a wide receiver, like Jaden Higgins from Iowa State, or Jeff Beck from TCU, or Kyle Williams from Washington State. I mean, the Bears could always use more weapons for Caleb Williams, although I'd be a little surprised. I don't know, is Ryan Poles going to double down on weapons, like go tight end and running back and wide receiver, with your first 3 picks? I do think they want to make more trenches investments. And as I've mentioned before on this podcast, in each of Ryan Poles' first 3 drafts, not every draft as a general manager, the Bears have taken at least 1 offensive lineman and at least 1 defensive lineman. And in a lot of those drafts, they had doubled down on at least one of those positions. So I would expect, if I could bet on this, I absolutely would. If FanDuel would give me a line on what are the odds the Bears take an offensive or defensive lineman on Friday, I would take that bet 100%. I don't know whether it will be an O-lineman or D-line, but between those 3 picks, one of them will be a player in the trenches. It might not be till the 3rd round. I could see Ryan Poles trading down from 41 and trying to acquire another late round pick to move down from 41 and still get a guy in the 2nd round you like. I could see Ryan Poles trading up from 39 If there's a guy who just made it into the second round of the draft here, one of these, if it's Mike Green from Marshall and he's not going to make it to 39, I got to go up and get this guy. I could certainly see him, giving up a future draft pick, or, I don't know if you could combine I don't know if your 5th and 7th round picks are quite going to get you up that high, but you might have to give up like a future 3rd or a future 4th to move up from 39, like something like that, to go get a guy in this range that you really like. But again, polls keep saying this is a sweet spot. There's going to be a lot of guys in this area we like. That lends itself to them not being as keen on trading up. So I think what I would predict most likely is Bears stay at 39 and take someone there, and then potentially trade down from 41 and add another 5th round pick to do so, or add a 4th round pick to do so. It depends on how far they move down, and then still get a player, in the 50s or whatever they like just as much as what they would have taken at 41. So that's kind of what I'm expecting for day 2 of the draft. Something in the trenches, some kind of trade down somewhere. But with 3 picks on this day, I think there's room for some real wild cards here. I throw wide receiver in there as a wild card. I don't think it's just going to be O-line, D-line, or whatever, that edge rusher, O-line, defensive tackle, those 3 picks. They could go linebacker here, as a long-term piece. Like Carson Schwezinger from UCLA could be a nice fit in this defense. It wouldn't shock me at all if they just say, hey, best player available, we'll figure out he can replace Jack Sanborn as a rookie, and then maybe in year 2 he plays in Tremaine Edmonds' spot, and you move on from Edmonds, and it's Edwards and this guy that you draft. I don't think just about any position besides quarterback, tight end, and special teams is on the board here. Running back, wide receiver, O-line, D-line, linebacker, cornerback, safety. I think anything is on the table here with these second-round picks. Certainly the depth of the best players available right now suggest D-line or defensive back is kind of where the strength is of the draft right now, but Ryan Poles will have his guys graded, and if there's just one offensive lineman he's got graded above all these other guys, he's going to take that one guy, right? It's not just about what the strength is, it's just what's more likely to be there. D-line and defensive backs is more likely that these first-round talents are still what lingers down there, as opposed to there's not a lot of O-line options here for him, so it seems less likely that that's ultimately going to be where they go. Whoever the Bears pick in the second round and third round of the draft, you can be sure we'll break it down for you right here on the Locked On Bears podcast. You can hit the subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts to make sure that you're keeping up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. I may even do a full extra bonus podcast episode to come out first thing Saturday morning after a big Friday night of the draft. We don't usually do a Saturday podcast, but it's draft season. It's football holidays, football Christmas all weekend long. And so I hope you've been enjoying all the pre-draft coverage. I hope you'll get even more post-draft coverage with us all throughout this process. Because even once the draft is over, we're not going anywhere. We'll still be breaking down rookie minicamp, OTAs, mandatory minicamp, and then before you know it, training camp, preseason, regular season, and we'll be cooking once again. But hey, buckle in for another exciting night of NFL draft. Coming back for a potential Saturday morning podcast, but certainly we'll be back in your podcast feed Monday morning at the absolute latest with another opportunity for you to bear down.